It's good. So, Mark, you're the independent filmmaker here. You're hearing about, now you got your 5-minute school here, right? So now you got your PhD. Buzz will give you your certificate at the end of the class. But talk a little about what you went through, the production, because, you're an independent filmmaker. You did mention you're dealing with animals, so you have a little bit of trying to use that as part of the storytelling. But talk about the production side.
I had black hair before I started the film in 3D. And getting back to Buzz's 5-minute list, the only thing he didn't have on that list is never work with animals in 3D.
Or children.
The thing he did have on his list, which I absolutely agree with, was use your brain. And unfortunately, when we started our production, there was no 3D for dummies, there was no 5-minute course, there was nothing like that. So literally day one, when we went 3D, we went to Google and we put in 3D, and that was how we started.
You've learned our secret.
It was a challenge, but the other thing on Buzz's list, which is and Bruce mentioned it as well, and that is find a good stereographer. And I was lucky in that I found a comrade of mine in Australia who I went to film school with, Paul Nicola, and he's a genius when it comes to visual effects, and he's a genius when it comes to stereography. So I was so lucky in that I was able to delegate a lot of the technical issues to Paul, who designed the rigs, he designed the camera systems. In conjunction with other people from our office, we designed the recording systems, and we're able to do it independently, under the radar, out of the loop, in 3D. So what I'd like to do is just show you a quick clip. I have to warn you though, the clip has got one 3D gag, and it's got one free plug. You obviously saw where the 3D gimmick moment was. I think the other thing too is we put all of our captions on the screen plane. Paul, in conjunction with Paul, we made a decision, and I think in the earlier works we saw some captions floating. I know in Avatar the captions were floating. We just bedded all of ours on the screen plane and left it like that. But in short, that was an independent 3D film. It's 85 minutes long. We shot with the silicon imaging camera system out of New York. The beauty of the silicon imaging camera system, it's a 2K system. It shoots raw, it shoots pretty, it's got a good software that goes with it. And you can divorce the camera head from the camera body. So in other words, if you want to put a rig down on the ground with the Toad, you could, unlike some of the other more expensive systems. We designed our own recording decks. We recorded onto hard drives. We did clone backups on LTOs. We just, every single aspect of the production, there was no precedent. There was no one you could call. There was nothing. So we had to do it the hard way, and we had to learn on the job. And it was an extreme challenge, but it was a very pleasurable challenge. We edited in 2D. We couldn't afford to conform left eye, right eye as we edited. We just couldn't afford it. We edited on Final Cut Pro. We locked off in 2D. And it was only several months afterwards that we finally, just before we timed or graded our film, that we had the chance to conform right eye to left eye and create the stereo master. So in every respect, I think the difficulty with 3D, and without any disrespect to the gentleman on left and right, the difficulty with 3D is that it can be extremely costly. We managed to find a way to do it resourcefully. We did it through, I guess, more of a guerrilla style 3D. and it can be done. So I think the other thing that really gives us hope and gives us great potential, and Ben McNeil from our office coined the word future-proofing. So it wasn't just about creating a film that put or immersed you in a world, it was creating a future-proofed media that you could in the future think of as being archived for any sort of development. And the difficulty or the challenge or the potential with 3D is that every day we're finding out 3D TV, Discovery Goes 3D TV, Europe Sky Channel 3D. So iPhone, there'll be 3D applications. All of this sort of stuff is happening every single day. Every single day, new hardware, new software is coming out. So in other words, think of 3D not only as being appropriate for the subject or the content of your film, but think of it as filmmakers as creating an archive or a future-proof archive for a whole lot of ancillaries that could be used in the future.
So, Phil,
Sure.
chime in here, because I know you're kind of the big advocate of a 3D pipeline, start to finish.
I think to help us move along a little quicker, let's play the MVA clip, but just take the sound down and you can look and listen. You can take it right down, Larry, thanks. So if you think of, there we go. I'll talk to you with your glasses on. So the beginning of Monsters vs. Aliens, when I just arrived at DreamWorks, the tools were in their basic form, very similar to basic camera setup now. You can change the separation between them, you can change where your convergent point is. And so I ended up doing a lot of the work manually myself. We were rendering at the time 2 separate eyes. There was no sharing of data. So you can think of that as maybe the stage that a low-budget live-action production might be in right now. But CG has the luxury of being a kind of laboratory for what can move on into live-action later on. And fast forward to where we are today, the cost of rendering 3D is only about 30 to 40% on top because we're sharing data. But also the tools themselves, what I ended up doing was going back through about 1,000 shots on Monsters vs. Aliens, analyzing the depth decisions that we had made, empirically over many months. And there's actually, we have a little calculation now which guides the artists who have never done 3D before to their first pass on stereo. And so what that will do is we'll measure distances to the nearest subject, look at the lens. It will make an interaxial estimate based on those decisions. And it will also make a placement decision. So it's kind of like a summary of my thoughts put into a little guide calculation. We call it the happy ratio. And so artists can literally follow a 10-step process, which we're about to automate, and do a first pass in stereo where half the shots will make it through to the final production in that state. And what that means to us in dailies is that we get this excellent 3D first pass, and then we can talk creatively about what we want to do beyond that. And I fully expect live action to be picking up, and I think 3Reality are probably already on this type of thing. I fully expect live action down the line to have picked up this type of calculation to get your first pass. It will be especially useful for games, live game capture. And so we'll start to have analysis in the rigs to be able to create good 3D content as we go. And just to cover editing there for a minute, the idea of making 3D work across the cut has actually become this huge thing that we never really expected it to be quite as big as it was at DreamWorks Animation. We ended up developing in-house tools that we call it the blending tool, but you can think of it as a depth grade. You put all your shots together and then you color grade it to make sure it doesn't bump between the shots. And we're doing exactly the same in 3D for depth. Now Cameron does this up front. You could imagine he's like pre-blending, you could think. He locks convergence with focus, so whatever you're looking at is always on the screen. This works very well for live action if you don't know, what order things are going to cut together. But it does give up the opportunity of having someone walk from far away to up close if you always lock what you're looking at to the screen. And so I like the idea that in depth blending, we are able to look at the cut and script where you want people to be far away, you want them to be close, and you're able to adjust across a cut to ease transitions. So think of it as an invisible blend. So general efficiency, guidance of tools, all the things that we've developed in CG that help artists get a really